So I think now, I mean, as well as thanking Gagan and of course thanking Omar and His Excellency for their time and efforts thus far, I think we have quite a few questions and answers that we can get through. I think there's been quite a few specific questions with respect to certain projects, either in Kuwait or indeed in Sohar, which I'll leave the panelists to address directly if they feel able to, or we can maybe try and cover it in a general question, and that maybe is what is the impact on the number and timing of future transaction as a result of COVID-19. So I'll put that to Gagan first, because I know he has a wider view, and then we'll perhaps get some information from His Excellency and also from Amar. So Gagan, if you can first try to answer that question.
Yeah, Steve, just so I understand this right, when you say transactions, did you mean investments, M&A activity, transactions of that nature in the port industry?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. No, thanks for that. I mean, as I have shared in some of the slides, indeed, our thinking is that some of the assets and operators out there who may have entered into their concessions or their investment, their assets at high prices, given the bull run in the port sector in the last 10 years, might feel the financial stress of this downturn, depending on how bad it gets. And they might feel the financial stress of the debt obligations that they have undertaken in the early years, which might mean that they might be more open to bringing in partners into their businesses who have expertise and financial resources. So there's no doubt that because of the various reasons that I shared earlier in the discussion, there's going to be an uptick of transactions and M&A activity in the port space.
Okay. Just to spin that then round, sorry Gagan, thank you for that. Just to spin that round then more specifically, and some of the questions that have come to specific developments in Sohar, first of all. Omar, there's been some questions about the timings of your developments. I just wonder what's your impression on that going forward as a result of COVID-19?
Sure. I mean, just a quick overview. We have 2 to 3 major expansion projects. And it's all towards the seaside. So we're doing a lot of reclamation and dredging to prepare land for it to be leased. We do this in conjunction with prospective tenants, and so synchronize their plans to our plans and move as one partnership forward. Not patronizing, but I have to say we've also been benefiting here from the expertise that we receive from WSP, and it's been an excellent partnership. We see interest still being sustained. We are not kind of putting anything on hold. We are continuing. Our shareholders are also looking forward to those plans to materialize. In times of change, if you think it's the end of the world, then probably be the end of the world. So you really have to thrive a little bit and take positive actions. If your tenants are international tenants, strong backups, high ratings, and so on, then I think it just means that you're backed up and you can go forward. And this is the position that we are in. So we're looking at a reclamation of 200 hectares on the southern side of the port. And also we had already reclaimed 85 hectares in another terminal, and we're looking at building quay wall and so on. and we see the interest continuing. And even at the hinterland side, we are also going ahead with the studies and preliminary designs for our projects. As they say in business, big dogs eat first, and I think that's an English expression. So you just you just need to be building up for that moment. So I think resilience.
Yeah. No. That's absolutely fine. And I think just to add my impression from a consultancy role, and certainly we've remained busy throughout March and April, and indeed throughout May. Largely, I think through work that we'd previously fixed from maybe February onwards. But I think in general, the development plans are not being cancelled, which is firstly a good thing. And if they're delayed, and they're delayed a little while, then that's fine, and consultancy companies can live with that. I see that His Excellency is also available, and because of the number of questions that have been addressed, specifically with regards to port developments in Mubarak Al Kabir and various other developments that you have in Kuwait, are you able to shed some light on the timings of those?
With regard to the Port Mubarak project, it is a project that is under the belt of an entity which is called the Committee for the Development of Silk City and Bobian Island. Mubarak port is within the Bobian Island area. It is an island which is, let's say, deserted. It's the size of a little bit bigger than the size of the Kingdom of Bahrain. And we are having future plans, which are part of the 2035, to develop the full capacity of the north part of Kuwait, which has not been developed due to regional tensions, including the Iran-Iraq war in the 80s, and then the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, and then as well the different threats that Kuwait were facing during the Saddam era. Now all of that is in the past, and the government now is focusing on developing the north side of Kuwait and Bobian Island, and that's not part of my projects. Both my hands are filled up with projects that the Kuwait Port Authority have under their belt within the 2035 Kuwait development plan. And these projects are the development of the 3 ports, Shueikh Shuaib and Doha, the development of 4 logistic cities, so that's 7, the smart port project, that's 8, and a dry port, that's 9, and also the development of 2 entertainment / commercial marinas. One, if Rosie can kindly put the picture of one of the projects, which is the Marasi. Okay. Do you have it, Rosie?
Sorry?
I sent the picture of one of our projects, commercial projects to.
Give me a second. Let me search for it.
Okay, I'll continue talking until you can put the project on.
Okay.
Yeah. So and the 2 projects of the Marasi, El Funtas, and the other project, which we still have not named. These are the 11 projects that we have with a $3 billion plus budget. until now. We've moved forward with the development of Shuaibah Port, and we've signed with Jacobs. And as you know, Jacobs is one of the largest engineering firms. It purchased CH2M, that purchased different companies, so it's probably now one of the biggest. They're responsible now for the development and expansion of Shuaibah Port. We're also looking forward for the expansion of Shuaibah Port as well. So basically, these are the 11 projects that we have in our hand. You can see Marasi project, Marasi al-Fantas. This project has been done, actually I designed it. I was drawing it to Royal Haskellingh, which was the lead engineer in this project. And the circumference of this project, which is, if you're walking all around the project, it's about 2 kilometers. It's the size of 15 Wembley stadiums. And in the middle, we have a hotel and a conference and a yacht club, all put together in one. And all around that, we're going to have a mall, recreational center, entertainment center, indoor theme park, cinemas, different focusing rent at moderate rates to the SMEs, small and medium enterprises, Kuwaitis that have, done different types of retail outlets or restaurants or cafes. So that's going to be, more or less focused on the SMEs that have probably obtained franchises from, abroad and wanting to establish their own business, because as part of the total plan in Kuwait is that we want to push out the Kuwaiti employees from the government sector to the private sector, and also have some sort of diversification within the private sector, that they can be employees in larger private sector companies, as well as establishing a $6 billion fund, 2 billion KD fund for the SME projects. And this is where we're cooperating with the SME fund in order to give the first right of refusal to good SME retail, restaurants, cafes, you name it. Already we've got the permissions to do the construction, and we have the second tender coming out, which is for the interior design firms. We're gonna fully, this is just the master plan. We have the interior and the detailed drawing of everything that's going out. That was supposed to be tendered in March, but due to this COVID-19 pandemic, things for everyone in the world is of course delayed, including us. So basically, these are the projects. I saw a couple of questions. Do you want me to answer the question now, Steve, or do you want me to wait for later?
I think if you can, you can type the answers directly, and then we can simply just move on, because I think also there was a separate question with respect to Soha. So I would like also to see or hear Omar's comments, and in the meantime, Your Excellency, if you could reply directly just by typing a response in the Q&A section, that'd be great. So Omar, in a similar vein then, there were some questions with respect to Soha East development plans, and I think also the LNG bunker jetty and maybe the VLLC jetty. Are you able to share your thoughts on that with the group?
Sure. All those projects have been announced, so there is all the right to ask about them. As I mentioned, those projects are part of our south expansion, and we are continuing with the development going forward. The LNG in particular with Total, and it's also to do with the changes in the IMO standards for low sulfur fueling for the ships. So it's also something on the industry, and we believe that both parties are quite engaged and going forward with that. It's also, I'm not the specialist on oil economics, but with energy, if oil is down, then also is LNG projects become then attractive as well. So I think it's going forward. Other projects like the East Development is also something that we are still seeing interest. Once potential tenants for us, we will commit ourselves to construction. At the moment, we are continuing with our preliminary designs. We're continuing with all the environmental impact assessments and so on, which are going to be an asset for us going to the future. So nothing has changed as far as we are concerned. It's all going forward.
Okay, no, thank you, Omar. That's very informative, and hopefully that answers the questions that have been posed from the delegates. I'd like actually then also to have some more questions more focused on the impact of COVID-19, and since you're on screen already, Omar, maybe you can give some insight into what impact COVID-19 has had, particularly with requests for the use of the free trade zone?
Sure. I mean, to start with, the first impact is on our Eid celebrations. So the Eid celebrations this time. Yeah. So with all the issues that are there with the changing environment in general, and also restrictions on movements and so on, there's naturally less trade that will happen. So, however, I think also people are experiencing a unique kind of situation, whereby it's not purely economical issue, it's a pandemic. So one could argue once the pandemic is over, then trade will happen, because there will always be a game of supply and demand, and you fit whatever the demand is. What I'm seeing though is perhaps a little bit of slowness in terms of final commitment to projects and signing up in some of the industries. However, there is also more interest from other industries which are emerging now as critical. So as I mentioned in my presentation, I see more on the pharmaceutical manufacturing, the equipment, PPEs, manufacturing, development of all of that is happening, and we see big interest. We see a lot of containers containing this kind of equipments, and we see people are also inquiring about them in our free zone. Food is something that this region in GCC and Middle East has huge vulnerability when it comes to food. As I mentioned in my presentation, 70% is huge. And we're surviving at the moment on the back of good relationships, on the back of direct importing and clever supply chains. However, we know that this, if continues, your source that you're sourcing from or securing the supplies from, that's also something that all governments in this region are focusing on. I also believe that the other industries also will see a pickup. Because if you look at the other industries that have suffered because of the pandemic, electronics is one. I mean, the supplies from South Korea when it comes to LEDs and LCD panels has stopped. And that clearly means that you need a middle point to continue over. And the middle point cannot be just a distribution house or a distribution center. It'll probably be an added value activity that you add to the manufacturing. So there is a lot that to watch out for. However, since I'm talking, I don't think that we will be witnessing the things that other people were talking about, like the factory of the world moving from China to somewhere else and so on and so forth. I think that's hard to see happening. I could be wrong, but even if that is to happen, then I think it's a minimum of 3 years window going forward. And to all what we know, the effects of COVID-19 might be over once the vaccine is announced, and people will go back to the basics and go back to continuing to hunt for maximization of the financial parts of it. Driven by the fact that finance is scarce going forward, and given the fact that economy is suffering. So who will come and invest in big factories that will come midpoint or that will go into Europe? It's hard to see that, to be honest with you. But that's my personal view.
No, that's very much appreciated, Omar, and thanks for that, and very informative answer that you've given too. Just moving on slightly, but also the impact of COVID-19, and I'll stay with you, Omar, if I may. Can you give me some insight into the effect on Zohar Port in terms of the number and size of vessels that are calling, and maybe even the number of units that are being handled on those calls as a result of COVID-19?
Sure. I mean, I've got my Q1 results just on the side here. So what we have seen is actually an increase of 4% of vessel calls, Q1 19 to Q1 2020. However, the ship sizes are smaller. So when it comes to GRT, for those of you who are familiar with GRT, we're seeing a very slight decrease in the GRT, the size of the ships. But I think that's also to do with the movements that had happened earlier as a result of the lockdown, mainly in India, and the lockdown of ships, because there was a lot of turnaround of lines and so on. For example, we're seeing no blanks, which is good, no void calls, which is also good, so that continue to be a worry for any port, but so far, so good. Quite happy with that. There has been increase in liquid, for example. There had been increase in loose bulk as well. So we haven't seen a lot of impact when it comes to that. Containers are just slightly below last year, probably less than 1% less. We draw a lot of conclusions from that. Steve, you are a man of experience, and I think a window of 3 months is probably too short to do that.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think the window is a little bit too short, and you know, since COVID-19's been going on, you know, we've changed our opinion probably on a daily basis, or certainly from the outset. But I think it's interesting from our perspective as consultants actually to see the robustness actually of the Middle East and the Indian subcontinent region, where, as you rightly say, that you know, the number of calls being cancelled is minimum. As you say, some of the vessel sizes are being reduced. but actually, you know, compared with the main arterial trades, Asia to Europe or Asia to USA, where we are seeing 25% or even 30% reduction in tonnage, and reduction in the size of vessels. So yeah, it seems that the Middle East, for once, and it's good to see, is still doing and performing pretty well. And you know, China looks like it's recovered now as well. So you know, 25%, 30% reduction in services back in February. We're even now seeing additional calls being made from Asia to the US, for example. So, you know, the recovery of China, I think, will help develop other areas. I'd like to put that same question to His Excellency Sheikh Yusuf, if I may, in terms of what impact you're seeing in Kuwait from COVID-19 with respect to the number and size of calls that you're seeing in the container industry.
We have a 9% increase of our incoming container throughput up until the 30th of April, compared to the first, let's say, 5 months of 2019. But I don't think, to answer your question direct, I don't think we will feel the impact until the second half of 2020. Why? Because a lot of people have put in their orders. Those orders are coming in, and both parties, the importer and the exporter, are committed to those orders. In the second half, especially with the automotive industry, then things are going to change a little bit more. We will see a decline of car imports, I'm sure. This is number one. The other industries, I'm sure, that are not going to be affected: the food, the healthcare, the consumables, the government project sector in terms of pipes and other equipment that are being imported for the different government projects. That's also not going to be affected at all. As I'm telling you, we have a 2035 program. We have over 130 projects that are moving ahead. There's no plans to. So the other reason is that maybe unlike other GCC countries that also depend on transshipment, our transshipment is maybe 5% of our total incoming container numbers. And therefore, it is our local economics that decide on that, and not the regional, economics and economic situation that would decide on this one. Now, looking into the future, for example, we need to talk, and as Mr. Omar said, we are part of an ecosystem. Then we need to talk with the different levels of our supply chain, the importers, exporters, the shipping lines, the different ports, regional ports. And I saw one of the questions saying that, the over supply of probably empty spaces in the ports. I think that's good planning. Every time I go into the container terminal and I see it half empty, or let's say half full, I'm happy. It means that we have containers coming in and out of the port. We have movement coming in and out of the port. Once the port starts stacking, then there is a problem, which is most probably a logistics problem that we have to solve. When you build a port, unlike any other utility or service project that is being built either by the government or the private sector, you need to plan ahead. For example, Shueikh Port, which is until now operational, I am in Shueikh Port as we speak, is 65 years old. And therefore, it's still doing well. It still has the land capacity to receive more containers and other type of cargo. And the expansion that we want to do is also to serve the future of Kuwait for the next 65 and so years. So the more empty spaces we have, it means better planning and better perception on how things should be done in the future. Because once that when Shueikh Port was built, Kuwait had a population of less than 300,000. Today we are 4.5 million strong, with 1.4 million Kuwaitis and 3.1 million expats. That port is still serving with Shuaibah Port nearly all our imports for the whole of the state of Kuwait. And you know, this pandemic, as I said, will give us what we say as lessons learned, and would add to our contingency future plans. And this is what we have to keep in mind, that any future dangers can come from anything. And this pandemic has hit harder than any terrorist attempt at the whole world at itself. So we need to be aware and learn from this type of lesson. Look at the different levels of the supply chain. We need to talk more, not only port to port, but port to other related industries as part of the ecosystem.
No, thank you very much, Sheikh Yusuf. Hopefully that answers the question and what's been posed by some of the panelists as well. Let's just take a look more specifically, and Sheikh Yusuf, if you can answer firstly, and then I'll invite the other two panelists also to answer. Sophie Tog asks, I would be interested to learn more about the impact of COVID-19 on food supply chains in other countries in the region. Maybe Sheikh Yusuf, you can give some brief overview of that, and then I'll ask Gegan the same question.
Well, as you understand, regionally, the COVID-19 has forced partial or a total lockdown to all the GCC countries at different periods, each government taking their own initiative, their own plan on how they will, handle the COVID-19 issue. And looking into the logistics, Saudi Arabia had a big role, because a lot of the fruits and vegetables coming from different Arab countries all go through the Saudi Arabian territories, and they've taken a lot of actions, including the exchange of those goods coming into the Saudi Arabian border using Saudi trucks and not the trucks of those countries. And we've dealt via the Kuwait customs and the Saudi customs to allow the Saudi trucks to come in, but not the other trucks of other countries, because of the unknown situation of the driver. Maybe he's infected. I'm sure also in Oman there is cooperation between the Saudis and the Omanis, and also the Emiratis as well, because they border with those two countries. So this what has been done in terms of the lockdown. In terms of full lockdown, yes, we had the disruption, and not because of the Kuwaiti ports. It's because of the or any of the related parties. It's because of the importers and the other members of the supply chain, the businessmen, the custom clearance. All of them thought that everyone had to stay home. Yes, everyone has to stay home except you guys. So we had to release circulars informing everyone that, come to the ports, take your cargo. You're not going to be arrested from the Ministry of Interior checkpoints. And therefore, people were kind of hesitant until we put out circulars, TV interviews, release newspaper release statements, so forth, to encourage the importers to come and receive their goods at the port, and to allow them to get passes, not only to get their stuff out from the port and containers, but also to allow their warehousing employees to go to their warehouses, their drivers to redistribute those goods to, especially food and medicine, to the different retail points of at least 500-600 retail points in Kuwait. And we have a strong co-op system, as well as certain private sector supermarkets that all need to receive food supplies every single day. So these are the things that we had to, let's say, handle and struggle with. And good management is also important, especially where there are problems to be solved. And this is a major problem that we have solved, talking to all the stakeholders, including the Ministry of Interior, to ease on those people, to allow them to collect, distribute, their goods all over the state of Kuwait without any problem.
Okay, no, thank you very much for your very full explanation, Sheikh. That's very informative. Maybe a little bit unfairly, but I'd like to ask the same question of Gagan, and if you feel unable to provide anything, then that's also fine. But at least give you the opportunity to comment.
Yes, no, thanks, Steve, and thanks, Sophie, for the question. Because of my lack of involvement, indeed, in the day-to-day operations and the supply chains management, etc., I would not be very fluent in my opinion. But I was thinking about, what else I could say around the wider subject of food supply chain that could be interesting to know. In general, there is no doubt that there has been, like His Excellency also explained in great detail, a complete rehaul of processes around certain particular kinds of cargoes, most definitely food supply chains. In that respect, we are working even more closely with our sister entity, LogiPoint, also based in Jeddah, which is more in the business of land distribution and warehousing, etc. And a lot of what they handle is food related. So I know the teams have coordinated very strongly on that front. One other thing that we are doing constantly, and perhaps more so now, is to actively communicate with agencies and companies such as Saudi Agricultural and Livestock Investment Company, who under Vision 2030 have the mandate and the responsibility of ensuring food security and food supply chains for mainly the Saudi consumers. So in that way, because port handling and logistics is not their core, and their core is ensuring that there's enough food availability, then we work closely with them in order to make sure that the supply chains work well. Having said that, perhaps I should also try and just use a minute to share, because the other two gentlemen have shared what has been the impact of COVID-19 on their numbers and vessel calls and such. So just to complete that loop there, without also seen some questions related to it out there, is that we in Jeddah, we have, we started to see some blank sailings back in late February, in March, etc. But then we've also had more recently ad hoc calls by the same shipping lines who had sailed blank earlier to be able to catch up on the volume. So in general, there has been a variation of volumes that have come to our terminal as compared to our, let's call it, pre-COVID expectation. But overall, for the first 4 months of the year, we are more or less on track. But like I think His Excellency also said, and Umar also mentioned, that we have in the most recent days started to see some downturn in the volume. So I think as the situation is becoming clearer, the old orders are handled, and the new situation is having an impact, I feel that over coming months, we might see a decrease in volume over time.
No, thank you, Gagan, and thanks also for completing the loop there with the details of port calls in Jeddah. That's also very, very useful. I see, since I have you on screen, and there's a question just come in from Afghani, which hopefully you can answer. Do you consider investing in the digitalization and development of IT systems related to the management and organizations of vessel traffic in your ports?
Yeah, I mean, again, I would not be extremely fluent with this, but I think I'll be forced to provide, I guess, a general answer, which is that RSGT, being a relatively new port, I was quite impressed by His Excellency's information on how old Shuaib port is and so on. RSGT, on the other hand, while Jeddah Islamic Port is of course a very, very old port, RSGT is the newest terminal. In that sense, has had the advantage of designing its infrastructure, but certainly its digital strategy from scratch, as late as in 2009. And we have constantly invested in it over time with a strong IT team that we had. That has given us the ability to be named, consistently within the top 5 most productive terminals of the world over the last 7 years. So I think without digitalization and the relevant investments in those, that would not have been possible.
No, perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we have one more question for. I see the Sheikh isn't there at the moment, so we'll maybe have to park that one. I'll firstly then just. I think that's the end of the questions.
I'm there, by the way.
You are here. Okay, then
Yes.
let's just do. We'll have one more question for you. And then we call an end to it, I think. So this is, if I can remember which question I was supposed to give you. So there's been more suddenly appearing as we speak. Just bear with me one moment as I find the. Okay, so this is the question from Taiba. When I can find it. Maybe it's already been placed in the answered column.
Yeah, I just answered it a minute ago.
Okay, sorry. So not only are we having technical problems, we're having the problems of an Englishman in his 50s trying to negotiate something technical. Apologies for that. I
want to put something very important, if you allow me just 1 minute. Yeah.
Absolutely,
within our food security initiative,
yes.
as proudly for not only Oman, but as well for us, that Oman is ranking #1 in the Trading Across Borders Index. We as Kuwait are proud to have the #1 food security index regionally. And within our food security program, there's a higher committee. I'm a member of that committee, headed by the Minister of Trade and Industry. What we have done to support the food importers is that they have a strategic requirement from the Ministry of Trade as part of the food security program to have a 12 months stockpile of the different important food items, such as rice and other types of grains, cooking oil, etc. We have increased that 3 months, and therefore we in the Kuwait Port Authority has given the 40,000 square meters of free storage, either dry, cold or frozen, to be handled by the Ministry of Trade as part of the food security program to increase the capacity of our local stockpile from 12 months to 15 months. And I think this is another initiative we in the KPA has provided, just to add to the certain difficulties during this pandemic, especially with the food and medical items. We've also given about 5,000 square meters of cold storage to the Ministry of Health to put their medical pharmaceutical products. So these, and also have given, thousands of square meters of cold stores for the food items that are being stockpiled for the Army, National Guard, and Police. All of that is done free of charge by the Kuwait Port Authority during this pandemic period.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency Sheikh Yusuf, again for more informative views. That unfortunately is the end of the Q&As, and I see a few people still with their hands up, and apologies for not having time to get around to them. I'm sure if you were to drop emails through Rosita, then those questions can be directed to the appropriate panelists. But in the meantime, we're going to share some videos now. But before we do so, I'd just like to thank His Excellency Sheikh Yusuf Abdullah Al Sabah, Omar Mahmoud Al Marizi, and Gaygan Sexaria for their excellent presentations and their insights, and of course for their time, which is very precious at this moment in time when I'm sure they've got plenty of things to do. So thank you very much for your attendance and for your insightful comments. I'll hand you over now to Rosita, who will give some presentations, I think on Kuwait, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I'm sharing this video of Sheikh, His Excellency. So let me just open this up. There are a few more videos.
If it's not opening, no worries, Rosie.
Oh, was it not there just now?
No.
Oh,
no,
it was not. Oh, okay. It went through the whole thing. All right, let me just share it again. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Yeah, we have
Okay,
something.
sorry.
Yeah, these are the smart helmets that have been implemented in China. I donated 10 to the different government agencies, including the Kuwait Port Authority. And it detects the temperatures from quite a distance, maybe 5-6 meters. And we tried it 1 meter, 2 meters, 3 meters, 4 meters, up to 6 meters. And it is, we tried it with also a body thermometer, and the detection rate is very accurate. And we're using it now in our security, port security are using it now. And we've actually identified a couple of people with high temperature that we had to side and take to the embedded Ministry of Health team within the port to actually test them for the COVID-19. And it helped a lot. Instead of checking each and everyone personally at an arm's distance, now there is a social distancing of at least 4 or 5 meters to protect our people and to protect others from becoming too close to check anyone's temperature. And these helmets are fantastic. They have also artificial intelligence technology to them, and they can be integrated with several types of software. So it's done very well, and they can check up to 500 people in 10 minutes. So it's served very well for us.
This is the second video that I'm showing.
We're not seeing anything yet.
You're not seeing anything? Oh, okay.
No.
Let me share again. Can you see it now?
Not yet.
Not yet.
No.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's you.
Hold on. Let me. Okay, here. Is it?
Yeah.
There? Yeah.
That's
okay.
fine. Yeah.
Yes, this is a disinfectant robot that works using the UV lights, and it sterilizes 99.9% of any place or building. It's a Danish robot, and as you see, all the operators are port employees. They're wearing all the PPEs. They're very well trained on this robot. And we donated one to the largest hospital in Kuwait, Sheikh Jabir Hospital, with about 1,200 beds, that has been allocated for the treatment of the COVID-19 patients. So we have one strolling in the headquarters of the KPA to disinfect all our headquarters. At the same time, we have one donated to the Sheikh Jabir Hospital, strolling around to disinfect all the rooms and the corridors, etc.
It's amazing. It's really impressive. It's like we're really in the future, right?
Yeah, we had to implement every type of gadget to see what works best and how we can go about, because as I'm telling you, us, part of any other government agency all around the world, are writing our own protocol to handle such pandemics in the future. So this is part of what we're doing, part of the equipment that we're purchasing. Hopefully that people can be aware and can also, if they think they are very useful products that help us a lot to keep our people safe and sound.
Can you see the third
No.
video that I'm sharing? No.
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Okay, try again.
Yes.
Now we can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. These are our disinfectant trucks with the KPA logo on them in English and Arabic. This is actually in China. They're going boarding. They've boarded the Ro-Ro ship on the 15th of May, and we're going to be receiving 6 of them on the 9th of June. And just to give you an input, 5 of my schoolmates have come to me and donated different products to the Kuwait Port Authority as part of their national patriotism, philanthropist efforts. We've purchased 6 trucks. 3 of those trucks were donated to us by one of my friends. We also have the self-disinfectant tunnels that were also donated by another friend. I have another friend that has a factory that builds different types of equipment. He has donated the whole factory under our responsibility. 2 of my friends that have a family truck business with over 1,000 trucks, a huge fleet. They've donated all the fleet free of charge. Whenever we need any truck or 10 or the whole 1,000, they're under our command at any time. This is the type of patriotism that we require at this time. I understand that there are people, greedy people, that want to take advantage of this pandemic issue. And but at the same time, there are very good people that are actually donating their factories, their money, even in the times where they themselves are doing bad. They've come forward, so kindly come forward and given us what they own. Also, we had people that are different, the engineers that come forward to us as well and have donated their knowledge in any type of engineering. If you need any design, anything that you need during this time, we're ready to design it. We have contracting companies coming up and saying, and the good thing is it's the bonding of my schoolmates in high school, the Boston network, because I studied at Boston University, and all of that helped with those people that actually know me personally, that come forward and said, you've donated, and we also want to donate as well to the KPA and to any other entity that definitely needs our services and our equipment. So I'm sure it is the same thing regionally happening. The people that are so kind and generous, I thank them from my heart, that have donated from their money and donated themselves as volunteers in the front lines to support the different government agencies, the Ministry of Interior, Ministry of Health, Kuwait Port Authority, and so forth.
Very good. I think just proving the adage that it's not what you know, it's who you know that makes things happen. Networking is extremely important, as we all know. Again, I would just like to thank our esteemed panelists, His Excellency Sheikh Yusuf, also Omar Mahmoud Al-Maritzi, and of course, Gagan Zexaria. And also add my thanks to Transport Events, to Rory Doyle and Rosita and their team for giving us this opportunity and this platform to connect with a huge participant or audience there. So thanks very much. And yeah, we at WSP welcome any approaches for any advisory services that we can offer.
Thank you very much. Eid Mubarak for everyone.
Let me just do the closing for a bit. I would like to thank Mr. Steve Ray for moderating the session.
Mubarak, if you're Sheikh Yusuf, إلى اللقاء.
إلى اللقاء سيد عمر. شكرا.
Even that, Rosita. Thank you.
Right. Okay. I would like to also take this opportunity to thank all the panelists, His Excellency Sheikh Yusuf, Mr. Omar Mahrouzi, Mr. Gagan Saksira, for your time and for preparing this webinar presentation for today. All the presentation and the recordings for today will be available to all registered attendees tomorrow. Thank you viewers for your attendance, and we hope that with this webinar is insightful. Please join us again next week on Friday 29th May at 11 a.m. Central European Time, 5 p.m. Hong Kong time for 7 transport events webinar entitled Current Challenges and Future Opportunities for Developing Ports and Terminals in Asia. A must-attend event for webinar for anyone who's doing business with ports and terminals in Asia. So please register at your earliest convenience. Please may I ask everyone to follow us at Transport Events LinkedIn account, and also visit our website at transportevents.com for our latest information on our market-leading annual events and webinars. Please may I ask you to contact me if you have any questions at rosita@transportevents.com for further assistance. That's ROSITA@transportevents. May I also invite you to email me if you would like to have your company latest full color logo and company details exclusively branded before, during, and after next week's webinar. Last but not least, I would like to wish a blessed Eid Mubarak for those who are celebrating, and a wonderful advanced weekend for everyone, everywhere in the world. Thank you, goodbye, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.